Madam Speaker, Mr. President, honorable members, fellow South Africans, Bagaetso, Dumela. This week, the President will celebrate his first 100 days in office. I want to offer our own congratulations to him for what he has sought to achieve in the past 3 months. In particular, the President and his party have made 2 announcements that have become very critical in the recent days, and I want to welcome those announcements. Firstly, the President has confirmed to the people of South Africa that he will not oppose our court application to scrap the deal by which the state would cover all of former President Jacob Zuma's legal defense fees. The President's decision and announcement that he will abide by the court's decision in this matter is an important step towards finally seeing justice for Mr. Zuma. His trial has been long delayed only because he was able to use public funds to delay this court process. And I believe once this strategy is no longer available to him, we will know that justice for his crimes will follow swiftly. His retirement must be as uncomfortable for him as his presidency was for the people of South Africa. Secondly, the governing party has in the last few days completed an about turn on amending the Constitution to enable land expropriation without compensation. The ANC has now said that it plans to do this within the confines of the constitutional framework. This is a very significant departure from the language the President used in the previous times. Because I think it is right, Mr. President, that the current provision in the Constitution safeguards against arbitrary expropriation and requires just and equitable compensation. It is a far cry from the broad-ranging permission to expropriate wherever, wherever, with no compensation. Then we can take the fight against land grabs that this government and you have spoken about today, and I welcome your decision in this regard, because it demonstrates to the people of South Africa that the President has shifted from perhaps the EFF's position where expropriated land is owned by the state to the position that DA has always held, which is that property rights must be protected. This, Mr. President, is progress. But let us not stop there, Mr. President. Let us, in fact, take the 1,000 of hectares of state-owned farmlands and hand this back to the people of this country. Ramaphosa, you know, like many South Africans, I grew up under Group Areas Act. But sorry, baka nabasa khone go ouna ntlo ya bone. Ke a leboga gore mo tlase ga constitution ka jeko ba khona go kry di-title deed. A re tswelle pele re fe ma-Afrika Borwa di-title deed re ye pele. In metros and towns, the DA-led governments have already started to deliver over 100,000 title deeds, making homeowners of the people of South Africa. Let us double these efforts. Mr. President, you said let us work together to achieve fundamental social and economic change. And therefore, I want to invite you to the rural community of Kwatyu, Pae, Eastern Cape, apha abantu bethu basasokola, abanamhlaba. They've been waiting for decades for land. Mr. President, let us go together. It is well within the means of this constitution to hand over those farms to those farmers so that black South Africans can own that land and prosper. But honorable members, these are two matters that are substantive and go to the heart of what President Ramaphosa needs to achieve. Namely, he must show real commitment to building a capable state that is corruption-free, and that he must prove it that it will return this country to meaningful economic growth that creates jobs. However, when we take stock of the first 100 days, the early morning mists of the new dawn are starting to lift and burn away under the glare of the country and the world. Given, in fact, how we suffered under the presidency of Jacob Zuma, it is understandable that for some time, the country gave the new president ample benefit of doubt. But now, in the harsh light of day, the conferences, the summits, the talk shops, the PR launches simply won't cut it. Too many of our people in South Africa are unemployed. Millions more wait who are unemployed and are insecure. They work in jobs that are insecure and inconsistent. What we need, fellow South Africans, is real, is urgent, is demonstrable change. If we want to rebuild our country, it needs a new agenda. And what I want to focus on today in this House is an agenda for reform, a change that will bring the South Africa that we want to bring. And the starting point, fellow South Africans, is that in fact we have to bring deep political reform. We must break free from the politics of identity as practiced by liberation movements across the continent. Our people need a political system in which their choices express their ideals and not their race. This is what lies at the core of the project that the DA is leading. Our mission, fellow South Africans, is to build one South Africa for all, black, white, Indian, and color. The political scientist and journalist Yasha Monk describes this challenge in his book, The People versus Democracy, when he says, "The noble experiment of multi-ethnic democracy can only succeed if all of its adherents start to emphasize what unites rather than what divides. In the last 8 years, a righteous impatience with the continuing reality of racial injustice has increasingly pushed some people to denounce the principles of liberal democracy as hypocritical, or even to make group rights the building block of society. This is a moral as well as a strategic mistake. The only society that can treat all of its members with respect is one in which every individual enjoys rights on the basis of being a citizen, not on the basis of belonging to a particular group," close quote. This was indeed written for an American context, but it is indeed relevant for us here today as we try to build a truly multi-ethnic democracy. This demands a government and a president that is committed not to some citizens, but to all our citizens. Fellow South Africans, what is absolutely crucial about this agenda of building a political reform is building a capable state. And in this regard, I want to congratulate the Western Cape government for an exceptional audit opinion that shows where the DA governs, hayi siyasebenza. So many of our country's problems can often be traced, our recent problems can be traced back to the ANC's policy of cadre deployment. When you appoint people purely on their allegiance, you are putting the interest of a faction ahead of the interests of South Africans. Mr. President, you are going to have to summon all of your political skills to in fact deal with the factions in your party that harass you from every side, even with more intensity than before. We're seeing this playing itself out in the Northwest. And in fact, the decision to place the province under administration can only be driven by politics rather than good governance. Because if it was truly about good governance, then let's go to KZN, let's go to Mpumalanga, let's sort out those provinces also and place them under administration. Because many people could ask the question, what has Supra done that DD has not done or ACE has not done? We're seeing it in the negotiated settlement here in cabinet, where certain ministers have kept their positions. Ministers Nomvula Mokonyane, Malusi Gigab, have all been kept in cabinet because we're trying to bring factions
Point of order, Chair. Here near the main door.
Yeah,
Consistently, Chair, the honorable leader of the opposition refers to members of the House in a manner that's in violation of the rules. The honorable deputy president, he referred to him, the honorable Mokonyane and other members. Shall you ask, please, the leader of the opposition to refer to honorable members in the appropriate manner as pertained in the rules? Thank you.
Thank you. He said ministers and then named them. Yes. Yes, honorable member, he said ministers and then named them. Let's proceed, please.
He said DD.
Your honorable member, if you said DD, no nicknames, please.
Okay, honorable DD.
No, you know that's improper, yeah, that's improper.
All
no,
right.
Say it properly, sir.
Mabuza.
Mr.
President.
Honorable member, just say it properly and let's proceed, man.
I've
Save
said
your
it.
time. Honorable
DD Mabuza. Can I not say it that way?
Okay, you can.
All
Go
right.
ahead now. Yeah.
You will, in fact, Mr. President, if we're going to reform the nature of the state, I would urge that we turn away from the policy of cadre deployment and employ the best people in government so we can deliver for our people. In fact, Mr. President, if we are going to continue with factionalism, you would have to explain to the people of South Africa why Mr. Moyane is treated in one way, but Mr. Fraser is treated in a completely different way. Instead of putting Mr. Fraser in a corner cell, you've given him a corner office at the Department of Correctional Services. Mr. President, equally so, if we are serious about dealing with state capture, we have to deal with all the people who are involved, and I would urge to start with Mr. Magashule, who cannot go unpunished, and those who are responsible must be held accountable. Bagaitsu, we have to cut out all of these out of government. And in fact, we must ensure that if we're serious about dealing with this, let us deal with people who are involved in state capture, like Ace Magashule. Honorable members, let us take a leaf. You see, in the DA, we don't speak, we just act. And therefore, already you can see Mayor Mashaba has already uncovered over 15 billion rands of corruption in Johannesburg. Let the NPA investigate. You will see half the ANC cadres there will end up in jail. But secondly, honorable members, we need sweeping economic reforms. We need a president that grasps the full scope of our challenge in our country if we're going to overcome it. Because it is indeed a big challenge. The latest labor force tells us that today a staggering 9.5 million South Africans are without work. That's 264,000 more than the previous quarter. When it comes to South Africans under the age of 24, the unemployment rate has moved up to 66%. 2/3, fellow South Africans, of our young people cannot find work. And we're not preparing them for the world of work either. 78% of our grade 4 children cannot read for meaning. Barely 10 years old, we've already failed these young citizens. Over the past decade, our foreign direct investment has plummeted and our national debt has skyrocketed. These are problems that define our nation today. This is what our president ought to be focusing on. President Ramaphosa has the advantage of following in the footsteps of the very worst the ANC has had to offer our country. Simply reversing some of Mr. Zuma's worst mistakes, like appointing new boards at Eskom, PRASA, and Transnet, is correctly welcomed, but I urge you to say it won't be enough. Make no mistake, I welcome these new boards and our embattled SOEs. But Mr. President, instead of changing boards, we should be bringing about real reform. We should begin, in fact, by selling off some of these SOEs. It is very clear that SAA is a fiscal risk, Mr. President, and yet you continue in your government to ask poor South Africans to fund it by paying more for their food, paying more for their transport, increasing VAT. Why don't you cut VAT instead of clipping, and rather clip the wings of SAA by selling it off, Mr. President? We need to be serious about living within our means so that when we look at our bloated cabinet and our very expensive administration, the word in town should be half of the cabinet must go and half of the administration must be clear. We need to be honest about what does and doesn't work if we're going to grow our economy and opening up opportunities for our people. Let's recognize that, in fact, we need national government to step aside and let our cities be the drivers of economic growth. Let's explore every avenue of getting young people into jobs, including, Mr. President, and I'd like to propose that we adopt a national civilian year, a year where young people can be able to get a year of work, of internship in key government departments and in private sector, so that our young people can have the dignity of work. Mr. President, I would urge, as a meaningful step towards redress, let's introduce a Jobs and Justice Fund, a fund where new entrants can get a foothold into the economy. This would demonstrate real redress, allowing the new miner, the new farmer, the new business owner to get a foot in the door, not just those who are politically connected at the top. I, honorable members, want to say this. If we simply tinker with existing policy, we will not turn this ship around. We need comprehensive economic reform. Thirdly, Mr. President, I'd urge that we speak for all the people in all the languages that bring us together. We seem to be unable to bring mature discussions about how to deal with the legacies of our past in a way that does not split us up by race and turn us against each other. We've become a country so ruled by our past that we simply cannot envisage a future, never mind achieve it. We are actually a victim of a failing liberation movement that has no choice but to cling on to the past because it has no credible plan for tomorrow. Every big conversation that we have today is about what has brought us here and not where we're going. I want to urge that we need to look to tomorrow. We need to bring solutions that are offered rather than that unite us as a people, rather than those who divide us. We need to bring solutions that bring us together. Fellow South Africans, we are constantly being told that there must be losers for others to win. We are told that the advancement of economic opportunity in South Africa is a zero-sum game. I don't believe this. I believe in the unity of our people. And I believe that it is possible for us to build an inclusive society and an inclusive economy without creating enemies of each other. We can only do this together. And our president, we ought to be obsessed about the future and make boldly a case for one South Africa for all, born out of our values of freedom, of fairness, and of opportunity, and building a diverse society. Fourthly, we need a president that can put the interest of young South Africans first. There is, in fact, no greater shame to every member of this House than our country's dismal public education. It should haunt our thoughts every day. It should be the standing item on the business of this House until it's sorted out. We will never fix South Africa until we can deliver quality, world-class public education. And we certainly want to achieve this by slashing 7.2 billion rands from the education infrastructure budget, as this government has done. Mr. President, I want to urge you, stand up to SATU, the organization that so hobbles our education system and now, in fact, controls 6 out of the 9 provincial education departments. We can lament state capture at SOEs, but let's never forget the state capture that is happening by SATU in our provinces. Fifthly, We need a president that can restore Africa's honor on the global stage. We need a president that can reestablish our moral authority in the world and in the continent that we ought to be leading. We should not side with dictators and pariahs and allow genocidal criminals to go free. This is not the South Africa we envision. We should be world leaders in morality and peace, in human rights and democracy, and the president must take the lead in restoring us to that place. He can, in fact, do so by abandoning our thought of withdrawing from the International Criminal Court. If anything, let us strengthen that institution by offering it our full support, sending our best jurists, and helping to ensure justice for the victims of crimes against humanity around the world and certainly in our continent. Honorable members, these are reforms our country urgently needs. This is what's required from our president. But it's going to be very hard for President Ramaphosa because he doesn't have the mandate for meaningful reform. We maybe have room for tinkering, but we need deliberate reform. We can't just look to someone who is better at executing than the old plan. We need a new plan. We need a president that is bold enough to lead our country out of this perilous situation we're in. Time will tell if our president can do this. Time will tell if we have a president who will deliver real change, or if we simply have a slightly more presentable version of the old one. If we want to help serve our people who put us in this house with their votes, we have to start treating their future as our number one priority. And that future is the one that is shared by each and every South African, regardless of what race they are. We must stop making enemies of our society. We must stop mobilizing around race. Mr. President, you once, and as others say, sometimes our politics are between black parties versus white parties. You once said that, in fact, if we vote for the DA, the Boers will come back. I would hope and I believe that this language will be put behind, because these are indeed lies that divide our nation, and we need to build a united South Africa for all. If you put these views and this language behind you because it doesn't serve our country, it causes divisions whilst we should be uniting our people. It takes a lot of effort to keep these fights going. Let us rather build our efforts into building a prosperous, non-racial, inclusive South Africa. Let us make our nation where our people no longer feel threatened by criminals in their homes, in their streets, and in their schools. Let us build a police service into one that can protect our communities and make our neighborhoods safe again. Let's begin by shifting control of the police to our provinces. Let's introduce rural safety units so that our farmers and farm workers can sleep well at night. Let us give our military what it needs so that they're able to protect and secure our borders. Let us put our efforts into fixing this broken education system that the majority of our children still receive. Let us bring back accountability in teaching, and let's attract the best talent and passion that is crucial to this job. Let us, in fact, commit to meaningful land reform with full title to our people. Let's reconfirm that ours is a nation governed by the rule of law, that there is one law for all citizens, no matter how rich, no matter how politically connected. But most importantly, Democrats and fellow South Africans, let us look for the future in everything that we do. Because if we don't, we won't progress as a nation. If we keep looking at the rearview mirror, that's where we will end up. Mr. President, this task is not an easy one. The reforms our country so desperately needs are at odds with much of the ideology your party still clings on to. If you decide to put our country first, it will come at a cost to the ANC. But I assure you, if we don't make these reforms, we will be left behind. Fellow South Africans, we are part of a global society, a global economy. We have to become more competitive and more resilient. We need leadership that recognizes this and can make the tough decisions that will move us forward. We need a president who will fearlessly confront the enemies of our progress, including those inside his own party or his alliance. Democrats, fellow South Africans, we need to focus. We need a president who plans future victories, not ones who leans on the crutch of past glories. We need a president strong enough to introduce the reforms that will save our country, even if it means taking on his own members in his own party. Fellow South Africans, in a recent while, we will go to the polls. This election will be a choice about the future of South Africa or whether we will be joined and shackled to our past. Let us learn from countries who have prospered, who made a decision that it is better for us to be competitive and for South Africa to be an investment destination so our people can find work. I believe if we make the bold, tough reforms, not only will this country be a prosperous one, it can be one as a model to the world about how black people and white people can work together. I believe it's possible, and if we stand and focus on the future, we can turn the painful past that we've faced. Amorena boloke setjhaba sa heso. Nkosi sikelele Africa. God bless South Africa. I thank you very much.